Welcome to More Than Maple, a show about food and culture across Canada from Bountiful Media and Harrowsmith Magazine. I'm your host, Capri Cafaro, and this, I know I say it every time, but this one is a very special episode for me because I have a guest joining me today that I met all the way back in high school. Now, we're not going to disclose when that was. But I am very excited to welcome a woman of many talents, a Louisiana native, and now a debut author, Marianne Rabalais Sulser. So she is the author, and I have this lovely book. I'm going to do a little Vanna White here, of the new book that just came out in June, Like Snow Before Sun. And she, as I said, is a Louisiana native whose family history inspired this debut novel. It is a work of historical fiction, and it's relevant to this audience because that historical fiction leads us back to the Grand Dérangement of the late 1700s and the 18th century, where Acadians were heading from the regions that are now Canada down to Louisiana. So this is a part of history that I have been really interested in. I've actually read a decent amount about Le Grand Dérangement, and I'm weirdly obsessed with Acadian history myself. National Acadia Day is in August, for anybody who cares. But Marianne, welcome to the program. I'm not going to do your story justice. Thank you for taking the time to share a little bit about your story and your new book here with me.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So give me the scoop. I am curious. So, what prompted you to say, not only do I want to write a novel, I want to write it about, a history that is a part of history that isn't that well known to folks that may not have a personal connection.
Right. I have always written stories since I was a kid, but never really thought, I had it in me to write a book. That the idea of writing a novel was sort of like summiting Everest. Like, there are people who do it right, but I wasn't sure that I was going to be one of them. But the other thing is that when I did sit down to write a book, I wanted to make sure that it was about something new. There are a million books on, World War II these days. And so I knew I didn't want it to be another one of those. And when I was doing my own ancestral research on my mother's side, I sort of realized that there was a lot more to this story than I realized. And I thought, well, that would be a perfect topic to write a novel on.
Well, that prompts an interesting question for me because, I'm curious about what you may have thought about your ancestral history, and then what made you think, wow, this is incredibly different. I want to continue to learn more. Kind of what was the maybe his family folklore versus maybe where your research led you?
I think growing up in Louisiana, we learn about, we call it the Acadian expulsion, but we learn about the Acadian
Right.
expulsion, growing up, and certainly had family members who would talk about sort of these tragic stories and things that happened not only to their families, but to their neighbors. And so, that was always interesting to me, but it wasn't until I started doing my own family research that I was sort of curious, why do these people move around and who is this, where is this? This really looks like an indigenous name or something like that, where I really started digging into it and realized that the story that I was told, in seventh grade Louisiana history was very simplified. And
Right.
Miss Richard in seventh grade history did not tell me about that the whole thing was a massive conspiracy, and she never mentioned anything about the indigenous population and how they helped the Acadians, survive. And so it really, really interested me, and I thought, gosh, no one's written, or at least I have not seen anything, and no one's written anything about it, so I couldn't help myself, really.
I can imagine going down these rabbit holes. I love to nerd out in that way, and I can tell that you do too. So give us the premise of Like Snow Before Sun. I mean, obviously we've touched upon the fact that I guess is at least inspired in part by your mother's family story and your heritage through that. But what's the premise?
So, Like Snow Before Sun is set in 1755 in Nova Scotia, in this part of the world that we call Acadia, in really the days leading up to the French and Indian War. The main
Hmm.
character is Jeanne LeJeune, and Jeanne is the daughter of a French Acadian merchant and an indigenous woman. And she really
Hmm.
balances these two sides of herself really well until her father gets arrested by the British governor.
Ah,
Naturally, she sets about doing what she can to have him freed, but it involves a perilous journey through the wilderness and allying herself with an Englishman and someone who she really perceives as her enemy. And at some
right.
point during her journey, she realizes that she's going to have to make some tough decisions between who she really wants to side with on this war that's closing in on her.
Right. And we don't want to give any spoilers to folks so they go out and get the book. But I'm wondering, because obviously our audience for this is predominantly Canadian. What do you think, folks that identify as Acadian who may live in places like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, or even parts of Maine that would have be considered historically part of Acadia, or identify as Acadian culture. What do you think they would think if they pick this up at the bookstore?
Well, first of all, hello, cousins. I'm sure we're all related somehow. Uh,
Probably.
and secondly, I think they'll really enjoy it. It is. There's a lot of things going on in this book. I was really attempting to have people see a really full picture of the
Yeah.
history and the full story, and really the sort of catch-22 that these Acadians found themselves in.
Hmm.
But full disclosure, it is an adventure sort of wrapped in a love story. So if you like a little bit of a love story, that's there as well. So I think it's a page turner, I hope.
Well, I can imagine. I feel bad. I just got it, so I haven't had a chance to delve in. But at the time that we're recording this episode, it is the summertime, and so this is definitely, I think, going to be a really nice beach read, or for the cottage country that we have here in Canada. If you're looking for something to read by the lake, it's. I think this is going to be great. Now, I want to ask again a little bit more about the indigenous aspect, because I can imagine that you took great care in your research and in your portrayal to do the Mi'kmaq story justice. And I'm wondering what that process was like for you to both research and carry as a responsibility.
Yes. I really took great care with it. And even I had a sensitivity reader go through and sort of help me perhaps correct some things and identify some things that might be a little bit sensitive to, certain readers. But I really, I did an extensive amount of research and I read so much. And probably the most frustrating part about all of it was that, you have like the Cajun culture, there's a lot of oral history and a lot of stories that
Right.
get passed down. And sometimes you would
Yep.
read one book and it would say one thing, and sometimes you read no, and it would say something conflicting. And so, sometimes I just had to sort of pick, and I have to apologize at the end of the book, and in my author's notes, and just say, if there are any mistakes, they are mine. And they were made with good intention, but
Mhm.
certainly with great care. It's such a beautiful culture, and it was hard. It was hard for me to pick and choose, what parts of it I wanted to represent, because there was
Mhm.
so much beauty there.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have a chance to go to Nova Scotia later this summer, and so maybe have an opportunity to engage in some going to some of the Mi'kmaq cultural areas and Cape Breton. So that's definitely on my list to do, being up here in Canada. And I did have an opportunity, I have to say, for folks that are not totally familiar with Louisiana, I think it's also important to kind of talk about that a little bit as well, because I think people have these broad strokes where, you know, Cajun and Creole get utilized in the same way. and they're not at all the same. And I got a great history lesson when I went down to film for America the Bountiful, where I was like deep in Acadiana, like on a crawfish boat, and and was also in New Orleans. But it was very important to me to convey to the viewers at that point the difference between Cajun and Creole. It's not, well, one's a language and no. So why don't you provide us with a little bit of that history as a Louisiana native with Acadian roots of what is a Cajun? Who is a Cajun?
So I'm half French Creole and half Cajun, and so the French Creole were sort of these European settlers who were in Louisiana, really prior to the American Revolution, and that's sort of where this name comes from. But the Cajun people were descendants of the Acadians, and they were just, no one really knows how they ended up after the Acadian expulsion, how they ended up down in Louisiana. But sometimes in the mid 1760s, 1770s, just these Acadians started showing up. There was this, diaspora of people really all over the world and all along the 13 colonies, and they just sort of started showing up there, and no one knows why. And so those people, there's Acadien. That's apparently, someone told me this, and I do not know if this is right, but that a lot of them could not read and certainly didn't speak English, and so somehow Acadien changed into Cajun, and so
I've heard the same. I've heard the same.
Okay, so I do not know if that is the whole story, but that's my understanding of it. And so so all of these Cajuns down in Louisiana are your Acadian cousins.
There you go. So I mean, that's again, it's important to connect those dots, and I think that it's just wonderful that you managed to do this. How long did it take you?
I was doing research for just my own ancestral, just background and knowledge for I'd say a decade or more. But by the time that I sat down to write this, it took me probably a good 15 months to write it and really kind of get it right. It was years of research.
Well, that's good to know, and I want the viewers to know that you have 3 kids. You have a full life, and a lot of responsibility, and I think that there is something to be said for not saying no to yourself at a certain age.
I've been telling people it's the wrong side of 40. To start a new venture like this, certainly. And like I said, it was something I always wanted to do, and I'm glad that it was actually during COVID that I sort of gave myself permission to sit down and do it.
Yeah, well, I think COVID gave a lot of us pause and in some ways an entirely new perspective on life. And because I talk to so many people in food and culture and agriculture, and again, I consider myself as part of this as well, that people used COVID as a pivot point, oftentimes out of necessity. But I think also it was, let's look at our priorities. Let's see what we really want to do. Let's look at our passions. Let's not leave things on the table. And I just think that that's just wonderful. It's just so wonderful to see you thrive and follow a passion of yours. And I think you're going to be entertaining readers all across North America and beyond. Do you have any plans to come up and do any book visits here in Canada? Can we get you up here?
I'd love to come up there. I don't have any plans right now. I did have a cute little lady who messaged me about a month ago, and she and her, I guess, friends all went to the university, a university in Nova Scotia. I forget the name of it. And they all lived on the same floor of the dorm. And this was like 40 years ago. So I imagine these ladies are in their 60s or 70s. And she said, we all live all over the world now. And we have a book club once a quarter. And we'd like you to come to a book club. And
fun.
And so I don't know if we're going to do it probably virtually, but I think it's
virtually.
Really fun. Yes. And they call themselves Les Elves. And so I don't know if Lizelles are watching, but I'm really excited to meet all of them, and can't wait to meet some more Canadian readers.
Well, we would love to welcome you here. We'll keep that line of communication open if we can make it happen, Marianne. We will up here. But anything else you want our listeners and viewers to know before we wrap?
Oh gosh, I always hate this question because there's so much. I could sit here and talk to you all day.
I know. I hate asking it, to be honest, because having been on the other side of the microphone and the camera for so many years myself, it's like, okay, like you ask these like open-ended questions, like, what do you really want from me? But, I also want to give you a chance to, this is such a big deal. And I hope that you recognize that. I know that when folks get too close to the hard work that they do, maybe they don't realize you don't have a chance to take a breath and take a victory lap. So I want to give you that right now here. Come take that victory lap with us, Marianne.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I, more than anything, just want people to enjoy it and hopefully learn a little bit about history in doing so.
Absolutely. And where can folks find the book?
Well, it's on sale really any place that you buy books, on Amazon, or you can order it from your local bookseller.
That's fantastic. Well, Marianne Rabalais Sulser, for the purposes of this for sure. It's been a real pleasure to visit with you again. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
More Than Maple is a production of Bountiful Media North America for Harrowsmith Magazine. It's researched, written, and hosted by me, Capri Cafaro. Recorded at That Toronto Podcast Studio in Toronto, Ontario, with technical support and post-production by 115 Creative.